Hi guys, Forgotten Wolf here, and this is the true story of the War of the Five Kings. And before we begin, I would like to thank you guys so much for 20 likes, 200 likes, 300 likes, 10k views, 15k views, 20k views, and 30 subscribers. This means so much to me, and I can't thank you guys enough for this. You guys have really supported me so much. I really appreciate it. These videos have pushed me constantly to do better, and as of recording this, I'm currently finishing the script for how to fix the ending of Game of Thrones, which is the 200 and 300 like special. And if you want to see me make more of this content at 25k views, I'll do a video on every video game Nintendo is currently making. At 100 subs, I'll do a 1-hour video on the FNAF Timeline. Please like, share, and subscribe, and let's begin. The War of the Five Kings took place between 298 to 300 AC. Of course, this is fictional, but that's the speculated years. And it's around 17 years after Robert's Baratheon. The events of this war happened between Season 1 and ended in Season 3 of Game of Thrones, the show. But this war had a huge impact as it set up the Battle of the Bastards while altering the landscape of who's lords and all that. But if we flash forward to 297 AC, the hand of the king, Lord Jon Arryn of the Vale, had died, which meant Robin Arryn ascended to Lord of the Vale, but Jon Arryn was actually poisoned by the Master of Coin, Littlefinger, and Lysa Arryn, Jon Arryn's wife. Together, the two made it seem that the Lannisters murdered him, and Littlefinger, knowing that Ned Stark would find this out, as Robert made it very clear that Ned would be his next hand of the king, and that did end up happening. Robert, Cersei Lannister, Joffrey Baratheon, Marcel Baratheon, Tommen Baratheon, Tyrion Lannister, Jaime Lannister all made the way up to Winterfell. But by this time, Ned Stark had 5 children with Catelyn Stark, his wife. Of course, their 17-year marriage. The kids were a boy, Robb Stark, age 17, a girl, Sansa Stark, age 13, Arya Stark, age 11, Bran Stark, age 10, Rickon Stark, age 6. In addition, Ned had supposedly fathered their bastard, Jon Snow, who viewers of the Robert Baratheon video will know is actually Rhaegar and Lyanna's children, which would have made him king, but Ned made him his bastard. But to get Ned to come to King's Landing, Robert proposed that his son, Joffrey, who was only a year older than Sansa Stark, they would be married, uniting their houses as was intended for Robert Baratheon and Lyanna Stark before death. Ned accepted, and he would take Sansa and Arya to King's Landing with him, while his bastard, Jon Snow, joined the Night's Watch. Before Ned left, however, Bran fell from a tower and lost the use of his legs, and it was discovered that someone had pushed him off. And the reason is that Bran caught Cersei and her brother and Kingsguard member Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, having sex, but no one knew it at the time. But the Kingsguard is a brotherhood that protects the royal family and will hold no lands nor father any kids. It's an oath. This means Cersei and Jaime fucking each other is having sex is treason. And when Bran caught them, Jaime shoved him out the tower, and Jaime was hoping this would kill him. Also around this time, the Stark children found direwolves. Robb was given Greywind, Sansa was given Lady, Arya was given Nymeria, Bran was given Summer, Rickon was given Shaggy Dog, and Jon was given Ghost. But the Starks departed Winterfell, and although there was drama on the King's Road, resulting in the death of Lady and Nymeria running away, but Ned arrived in King's Landing safely. Shortly after arriving, Littlefinger pointed Ned in the right way to where Ned discovered that Joffrey, Marcel, and Tommen were bastards fathered by Jaime Lannister, and the mother was the Queen, Cersei Lannister, but they were not. The crucial part is that they were not Robert's kids, which is treason. This meant that Stannis Baratheon, Robert's brother, was the true heir. Ned had planned to tell Robert, but he confronted Cersei first to try to get her to leave. Instead, Cersei made plans and got her nephew Lancel Lannister, not a nephew, her cousin Lannister, to make King Robert very drunk to the point that Robert got killed by a boar. This crucially meant that Robert was dead, and it was a mad dash for power. And Ned sent the letter to Stannis Baratheon telling him he is now king, and Cersei made Joffrey on the throne. And what Ned tried to imprison Cersei, Joffrey, Marcel, and Tom, and he was betrayed by Littlefinger, and Ned was sent to prison. But just before this, Catelyn Stark had been seeking justice for Bran being pushed out the tower and the murder of Jon Arryn. She had taken Tyrion Lannister prisoner in the Vale, which is part of the reason why Ned Stark was kept prisoner instead of being outright killed, is because the Starks held Tyrion. Tyrion was on his way back from visiting the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch is similar to the King's Guard, except they protect the realm from the White Walkers and the Wildlings. But Catelyn taking Tyrion prisoner was an insult to Tyrion's father, Tywin Lannister, who led an army out of Casterly Rock. Sorry for the notification. While his other brother, Jaime, was sent to burn the Riverlands. Jaime is Tyrion's brother, by the way, and Cersei's sister. Yeah. And in case you're wondering why Jaime was not protecting the royal family in King's Landing, it's because he had broken Ned's leg, preventing him from leaving King's Landing. And all this was spiraling out of control, and that also when Robb Stark received word from his sister Sansa that Ned was imprisoned for supposed treason. Robb Stark had to leave Winterfell with the whole Northern Army to A, get justice against the Lannisters, B, free his father, and C, free his sisters. Now in charge of Winterfell was Robb's younger brother Bran. Robb Stark began his journey, and the first battle of the war happened. At the battles of Mummer's Ford, where a small army of Ned's own men he sent, and was defeated by Tywin Lannister's bandman Gregor Clegane. This allowed Tywin to send half his army, led by Jaime Lannister, to siege Catelyn Stark's home, Riverrun, home of House Tully, while Tywin rode towards the Green Fork to battle Robb Stark, the young wolf, when he got down south. But in order to get into the south, Robb Stark needed to pass the Twins, held by Lord Walder Frey. Walder Frey allowed his crossing on the condition that Arya Stark would marry a Frey son, and Robb Stark, now Lord of Winterfell, would marry a Frey as well. Robb Stark didn't have time to lay siege to the Twins, as he needed to get to Riverrun before Jaime Lannister could take Riverrun. So he accepted these terms, and Robb made his way down south. But following Ned's imprisonment, the trial Tyrion Lannister was fought in the Vale. Tyrion demanded a trial by combat, so a sellsword named Bronn stood up for him, because Tyrion, as a Lannister, always says, a Lannister pays his debts, and Bronn ended up winning, meaning Tyrion was a free man. Tyrion and Bronn traveled throughout the Vale, encountering the hill tribes, which Tyrion promised golden weapons and to travel with him in order to not kill him. Yeah. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Arya Stark had escaped from the Lannisters in King's Landing, was running around the city. Meanwhile, Cersei was making arrangement with the Night's Watch representative Yaren to send Lord Ned Stark to the Wall, being stripped of all lands and titles, in permanent exile. This would have prevented the war between the Starks and the Lannisters, and this would get Robb out of the war, allowing Tywin to deal with Robert's brothers Stannis and Renly. Ned Stark was taken up to the Sept of Baelor. There, King Joffrey Baratheon would make his judgment. For Ned's punishment, Littlefinger had convinced Joffrey to make Ned's punishment, so the young and glory-hungry King Joffrey acted on Littlefinger's judgment, deciding to execute Ned Stark for his treason. While Sansa Stark screamed and was begging for mercy, Cersei tried to convince Joffrey otherwise. Littlefinger smiled as he watched the sword go into Ned Stark's head, where the Lord of Winterfell, Eddard Stark, met his end. Ned Stark was dead. Arya Stark had to pretend she was a boy and went with Yaren up to the Wall. Well, Yaren knew Arya Stark was in King's Landing because Ned had given him specific instructions. But going along with Arya Stark was a boy named Gendry, more on him later. But Sansa Stark was being abused by Joffrey. Bran and Rickon were sad, but still safe in Winterfell. Robb Stark was, but meanwhile for Robb, he was still battling. He split his army into two, one commanded by himself and one by the Lord of the Dreadfort, Roose Bolton. Two battles were then fought. Tywin and the newly released Tyrion battled the Starks under the command of Roose Bolton, where the Lannisters expected to battle Robb and his huge army. The huge Lannister army won because Robb sent barely anyone with Roose. But the next one was the Battle of the Whispering Woods, which was barely a battle, more of a strategic masterclass by Robb. Robb's whole army moved at night, with Roose staying to battle the Lannisters. The Lannisters at Riverrun were under the command of Jaime Lannister, and they had to lay siege to Riverrun in 3 different camps. Robb's army was easily able to defeat the divided Lannister army, and after the battle there was an important captive taken. Tywin's son, Jaime Kingslayer Lannister, was taken captive by Robb and Catelyn Stark. Now, after the battle, Robb learned that his father was dead, and now the Northern men need to find a new goal other than getting revenge on the Lannisters and freeing the Stark girls. The Lannisters were at ruin at this revelation. Kevin Lannister, Tywin's brother, suggested a peace treaty, but Tyrion convinced them otherwise. But Tywin now handed the king. He had to calm King's Landing down for making more stupid decisions. And Tywin Lannister was handed the king now. And to make more stability, he sent his son Tyrion Lannister to be handed in his place. Tyrion was a dwarf, and Tywin hated him, but this surprised many people with Tywin sending Tyrion. Meanwhile, the Northern men had a choice: bend the knee to Stannis or Renly. But Lord John Umber had a third suggestion, that neither said bend the knee to neither. Instead, rally around Robb to be the king in the north. The king in the north! The rest of the Northern men and Theon Greyjoy followed suit. As everyone at Robb's camp shouted, the king in the north, Robb was crowned as the second king of the War of the Five Kings. The year was now 299 AC, and it was a huge change in Westeros. The War of the Five Kings currently had 2 kings, but Westeros would see the emergence of three more kings. Ned Stark's letter had finally reached Stannis, and he sent a letter to all the lords of Westeros proclaiming that he is king and Joffrey, Marshall, and Tommen are all bastards. Stannis could have gained significant support if it wasn't for the fact that he was a supporter of the Lord of Light, with Melisandre the Red Priestess convincing him. Instead, the Stormlands were divided between Stannis and his younger brother Renly. At the beginning of the year, Renly had won the support of Highgarde and the seat of House Tyrell and the rest of the Reach by marrying Margaery Tyrell, making her his queen. And the 5th king was Balon Greyjoy. Greyjoy had previously rebelled 10 years before, but had lost thanks to Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. But they were now dead and Westeros was severely divided, so Greyjoy tried again. After Greyjoy's rebellion, his last son, Theon, had been taken as the Starks' ward at Winterfell. But now Theon was on his way back to the Iron Islands to negotiate an alliance, supposedly, because Robb was desperate for allies. But this would be a decision Robb would soon regret. Another camp to mention is the Night's Watch. Now, they weren't in the war, but they had now gone beyond the wall, and they were led by Jorah Mormont. However, Mormont sent Corran Halfend of the Shadow Tower to go scout at the Wildlings, and Jon Snow joined him. More on them later. Somehow the Lannisters in King's Landing were managing to act smart and stupid at the same time. Following the letter of Stannis. Even though Arya Stark could escape the city, Cersei fooled and lied to everybody by making it known that they still had Arya in their possession when they didn't. And as for the idiot side, Robert Baratheon had fathered many bastards during his reign, so Joffrey ordered them all killed. Why? It shows you've got something to hide. One of these bastards was named Gendry, who was traveling with Arya Stark up the King's Road. Robb Stark, meanwhile, is making moves against the Lannisters, who were just throwing the war away, because why not? Robb Stark sent his mother Catelyn as an envoy to negotiate with Renly, and Renly said he would allow Robb to be king in the north so long as he would support him as king of the Seven Kingdoms. And the second move was that Robb fought another battle with the Battle of Oxcross. The Lannisters made another army at Casterly Rock and began marching at night. And one night they settled into camp, and Robb and his direwolf killed their whole army and had a free march to Casterly Rock. But after the battle, Robb started to fall in love with a nurse named Talisa. The first battle for the Baratheon section of the war next was the Battle of Storm's End, where Stannis had laid siege to Storm's End with the intent of killing Renly and taking his forces. Renly rejected an offer of peace, so Stannis had sex with Melisandre to produce a shadow baby, which was used to kill Renly. Stannis got his wish, taking the whole Stormlands army. But the Tyrells left. They returned home. And Catelyn left the camp after Renly's death with a knight by the name of Brienne of Tarth in her possession. With Stannis winning against Renly, Tywin had a huge choice. Either lose Casterly Rock to Robb Stark, or lose the Iron Throne to Stannis. But meanwhile, in King's Landing, Tyrion Lannister, he had heard of Renly's death, and so in a desperate attempt to give his father even a slight chance, he had sent Littlefinger, Master of Coin, to negotiate with the Tyrells to have Margaery Tyrell marry Joffrey Baratheon instead of Sansa, because you can't have your king marrying a traitor's daughter, apparently. While Robb Stark was in the south, Balon Greyjoy saw an opportunity and invaded the north. Theon Greyjoy, under the command... He was supposed to just take a bridge, but instead he went against his commands and took Winterfell at night, meaning Robb Stark's brothers, Bran and Rickon, were captives along with their direwolves. The news made Robb angry, and although he wanted to return north and take back Winterfell and kill Theon Greyjoy himself, Roose Bolton convinced him to keep battling in the south and let Roose's bastard son, Ramsay, lead an army from the Dreadfort to take back Winterfell. Ramsay's army wouldn't come for a while, but Bran and Rickon weren't safe. Theon Greyjoy then decided to hang Bran and Rickon Stark. Tywin Lannister began his march up to River Run to get back his son and stop Robb from taking Casterly Rock. But while the whole world thought Bran and Rickon were dead, the Stark boys survived. A wildling named Osha took Hodor, Bran, Rickon, and their direwolves out of Winterfell, sent the wolves swimming through the river to throw the scent off, as Theon had actual dogs in his possession, and they snuck back into the crypts of Winterfell to keep them safe, as they were now hiding from the world. And all the Stark children began disappearing, as with Tywin leaving Harrenhal, Arya Stark, who had been Tywin's cupbearer although no one knew it, escaped with the help of Jaqen H'ghar, and Jon Snow had become a captive of the wildlings. Meanwhile, in the south, King's Landing was preparing for the battle of their lives, at the Battle of the Blackwater. It was between Stannis Baratheon and Joffrey Baratheon. If Stannis wins, then Cersei, Tyrion, Joffrey, and they would all be dead. But Myrcella would survive because Tyrion had promised her to a Dornish prince and shipped her to Dorne. There would be peace, though, if Stannis won, because Robb would probably return home, and with the Lannisters dead and justice served. If the Lannisters won, meanwhile, then the war would continue, or with an uncertain future for Stannis. Tyrion had been laying traps with wildfire, and when the battle began, he used his trick, allowing Bronn to ignite the wildfire, killing a bunch of Stannis' troops and ships, including Stannis' Hand of the King, Stavros Seaworth. Stannis then landed on shore, and his troops began to smash the gate. It was at this point where the wimp King Joffrey Baratheon ran back to his mother with a Kingsguard member Sandor Clegane, or the Hound, ran away and deserted. So in the king's place, Tyrion Lannister led an attack and stopped the gates from being stormed before a barrage of troops under the command of Stannis himself arrived. Tyrion was attacked by Sir Mandon Moore before Tyrion's squire, Podrick Payne, saved him. As Tyrion's consciousness began to fade, he saw the red and green banners of Lannister and Tyrell. In the throne room, Queen Cersei was about to give Tommen poison, thinking the battle was lost, when Loras Tyrell and Tywin Lannister burst into the throne room. The Lannisters had won. Littlefinger had managed to get the Tyrells on their side, and they had marched south to King's Landing. Tywin had been marching north to meet Robb, but Robb had sent his uncle, Lord Edmure Tully, and Edmure seriously fucked up and sold the whole war right here. Robb wanted him to be defeated by Tywin so that Tywin could go back into the Riverlands and Robb could cut him off, preventing him from getting down the King's Road. But Edmure had defeated him, sending Tywin running back to Harrenhal to the King's Landing, which was Robb's and the realm's worst fear. The Lannisters were now back in power. Prior to the Battle of the Blackwater, Catelyn Stark had received a proposal from Tyrion that she release Jaime and she would have her daughters back, Sansa and Arya. At first, Catelyn had declined, but following the fall of Winterfell, she accepted the offer behind Robb's back, sending Brienne of Tarth to accompany Jaime Lannister back to King's Landing. Robb Stark was simultaneously mad at Catelyn and happy in love. Robb had fallen in love with Talisa, and the two had sex, which meant Robb chose her honor over his own and ended up marrying her, despite Catelyn trying to persuade Robb otherwise. And the last battle to be fought in 299 AC was up north, between Ramsay Snow, Roose Bolton's bastard, and Theon Greyjoy. Ramsay had come to take Winterfell back, and Theon tried to hold it and stop him, but they were under siege, and Theon's Ironborn betrayed him and ran away, dropping Theon off to Ramsay to make him captive. For an unknown reason, Ramsay ordered Winterfell burnt, and this would frame Theon and the Ironborn. Ramsay took his army and Theon back to the Dreadfort. Winterfell had been burnt to a crisp, but out of the crypts of Winterfell, Bran, Rickon, Hodor, the Direwolves, and Osha rose again. Prince Bran was given a choice, and he decided to go to the Wall to seek the protection of Jon Snow. Osha became him and Rickon's protector for the time being, but since Bran couldn't walk, Hodor had to carry them there. And the year was now it was 300 AC, final year of the War of the Five Kings. Although Stannis and Balon still lived, they both lost huge territory, since Stannis had just lost the Battle of Blackwater, and Balon had began seeing his armies in the north be defeated by the northern lords. Robb Stark, meanwhile, was in huge trouble as he received word that Bran and Rickon were supposedly dead, even though they weren't. He had lost the support of House Frey since he broke the marriage pact. Stannis, meanwhile, he actually had a positive. He regained his hand of the King Davos, who had survived, and the fishermen brought him back, while Joffrey officially put Sansa aside for Marjorie. But in King's Landing, the Tyrells intended for Sansa Stark to marry Loras Tyrell, who was the heir to Highgarden. This would also mean that the Tyrells would have the heir to Winterfell, since Robb Stark was facing defeat. But Sansa told the Tyrells that Joffrey was a monster, and Marjorie's mother, Olenna Tyrell, began to plot, going all the way up north. The Night's Watch was on their way back to the war when a mutiny occurred. A majority of the Night's Watch's men killed Lord Commander Mormont and their host Craster. Samwell Tarly and his friends, minus Jon, escaped. Jon was still captive by the wildlings, and although they were making their way, the wildling army was making their way closer to the wall. Jon and his group were past the wall, on their way to assault Castle Black, where Jon had been stationed prior to captivity. Robb Stark, meanwhile, was in even more trouble. Not only were the Lannisters more powerful than ever, but one of his own bannermen, the Karstarks, betrayed him, as Lord Rickard Karstark had killed Robb's Lannister captives. This crime resulted in Robb killing him, which made the Karstarks march home. Robb Stark needed a new ally to replace all the Karstarks in his army, so he offered Lord Walder Frey a second marriage pact, being Lord Edmure Tully, now Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, would marry one of the Frey's daughters. Meanwhile, Tywin Lannister had been making good use of his position as Hand of the King, as he made further moves to hurt Robb. He had arranged for Littlefinger, who was given Harrenhal as a thanks for all his efforts. Littlefinger had gone to the Vale to wed Lysa Arryn, who was Lady of the Vale. And Lysa and Littlefinger, if you know from Robert's Rebellion and earlier in this video, are great friends. They are lovers. So this was no issue. And another thing, Tyrion had been made new Master of Coin. And before leaving for the Vale, Littlefinger discovered the Tyrells' plot to marry Sansa to Larys, and he told Tywin. So to prevent from losing Winterfell, Tywin arranged for Sansa Stark to marry Tyrion, while Cersei would marry Larys. Sansa and Tyrion were married, but Tyrion never consummated the marriage, meaning it could be disallowed. This meant that Robb's heir was in Lannister hands, but it was not all bad news for Robb. The Freys had accepted the offer, and so Robb went to the twins to oversee the marriage of Edmure Tully to Rosalind Frey, and to get the Frey army. Although Robb was unaware, Sandor Clegane had gotten a hold of Arya Stark and was bringing her back to Robb to ransom her. Robb Stark's wife, Talisa, had also become pregnant, and the couple decided that if it was a boy, they'd name it Eddard, after Ned's father. Tywin also began working the Ravens. Robb Stark arrived shortly at the twins for the wedding. The wedding happened. Edmure and Rosalind were carried off to the bedchambers to consummate the marriage, while Arya Stark managed to run away from the Hound. But the two discovered that the entrance to the wedding was closed off. Suddenly, inside the twins, there were arrows everywhere. Talisa fell dead. Grey Wind and the Northerners fell suit. Robb Stark, the king in the north, was also dead. Catelyn Stark had occurred. Arya Stark, meanwhile, watched crying as the Stark banner was burned and the Hound carried her off to safety. The War of the Five Kings had ended with the Red Wedding. Tywin had promised Roose Bolton to become Warden of the North and Walder Frey, Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, in exchange for Robb Stark's death. This was my least favorite episode of the whole of Game of Thrones. I really hate it. But if you want to see what happened to Daenerys Targaryen in the meanwhile during this war, or what happened when Jon escaped captivity, while he got a hold of the Wildlings' plan to return the wall, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, bye!